So we'll go ahead and get started here. So we're going to talk about securing Windows 10 with compliance baselines in SCCM. Before I get started, how many guys in here work with SCCM? Great. And how many of you are tasked with making sure your systems are secure? We just had a side conversation here about vulnerability scanners and all of those kind of compliance activities that go along with making sure you're got a good security footprint, you're patched, all that fun stuff. Great. So we're going to kind of dig into one of the topics around how leveraging PowerShell with SCCM to kind of give you a great starting point to make sure that you are secure, and also allow you to track that compliance, report on that compliance as well. Before we dive in, I just want to say thanks to all of the sponsors for this event and for the Raleigh PowerShell group for putting this on and having us all out here. So, for me, and maybe for some of you, security is a 4-letter word. Maybe a 3-letter acronym or a 5-letter acronym as well, but it's always tends to be a pain. You know, hey, we're not secure, there's a problem. Or, hey, we just bought this new product or we're taking on this new business and now we've got new regulations that we need to comply with. So, for me, here's my favorite examples. Working with STIGs, working with PCI, working with HIPAA, and what this really means to me, both as a Microsoft PFE and as an administrator in a company environment. Beforehand, it always, one more regulation there, but it means an audit. Somebody's going to come in and they're going to say, hey, you said you're compliant, show me you're compliant. You know, auditors are going to say, we're going to pick 10 machines at random across your environment, show me they're compliant. And they may have a script for you to run, or they may say, just log in, let me see. So we're going to make that process easy, or at least easier for you. So one of the things here is, why would I even do this? If I've got a baseline that I've put into group policy, why would I even consider putting it into SCCM and tracking compliance against that? And that's really around the trust but verified principle. That, you know, group policy is great, but it's not always successful. Sometimes you have replication issues. You've got one version on one domain controller, one on another, so you're not going to be compliant because of issues like that. The other kind of reason to verify that is that if you've already have systems that are compromised, the malware that's on the system, maybe monitoring for those settings that group policy is changing and reverting those. So even if it's resetting them every 15 minutes, they're still going to set them back so that they can operate within your environment. I'm going to use our Microsoft security framework as kind of a reference template that I'm working with. It's not the end-all to be-all, it's a starting point for it. I like this framework because it lays it out in different rings or deployments that you may have impacted here. So you have our level 1 baseline, which is safe to apply to almost every machine in your environment. And then based on the role that the machine plays, you're going to expand that ring out to be more and more secure. With that top level being your administrative workstations within here. We're going to mainly focus on that level 1. It's a broader piece, but for whatever regulations you guys may have to comply with, you're going to have different baselines. You may have something coming in, you know, if you're in a DoD environment, you've got regulatory STIGs that you have to comply with. If you're working with PCI, they have their own baselines. Sometimes they match exactly what's in our Microsoft framework. Other times they are more secure, or they'll have different settings than what we have. I have a link up here as well. I think that the user group is going to make these slide decks available for you as well. If they don't have a repository, then I'll publish it out and get that communicated from the user group as well. So there's a couple tools that we're going to focus on here, and these are tools really to help make it easier. The first one here is the converting from a GPO to a command line object. This is a PowerShell script that was written by one of the Microsoft PFEs a couple of years ago that will allow you to export the items from a group policy object in AD and then automatically create those compliance items within SCCM based on whatever values are being set within the group policy. The other one that's a nice one, if you're looking at something very specific, is one of the MVPs for SCCM wrote this Reg to CI tool. He has both an online version where you can go into a website, just paste the content of a registry file, and it will automatically write the PowerShell script for you to do both a discovery check to see if it's set correctly, and also to do a remediation step if you want to set the item there. And then he also has a command line tool that will do the same thing. You can point it at a group policy object, or you can point it at an export or a backup. So those registry poll files that are associated with group policy can be used to automatically generate the compliance items. These are some of the two favorite tools that I work with. They have a different focus. The convert tool, the PowerShell script there, that tool will go through and leverage SCCM's built-in providers for the different items. So if we're looking at a registry key, we've got some built-in providers in our compliance items that will look at the registry keys. The other tool is all PowerShell. It just generates the raw PowerShell. We don't rely on the providers that are already in the SCCM environment.
Is that a CI or CL? Or?
It's CI for compliance item. And before we go on to more here, so this is the registry to PowerShell converter. This is the web version, and we'll show you here. Let me get in here. So in here, if we just take a registry file and we put this in to the web interface here, we can click here to generate the check script, and this will give you PowerShell here. So obviously you could write this yourself saying here it is, but if you have a list of items that are already in a registry file, this is an easy way. This is the check script, and what you'll notice here is for each item, it goes through and it checks those values, and then because it's intended to be a compliance item, if it doesn't find it, it has an else statement that says return false, and that's really for the SCCM engine to say I'm not compliant. If I am, at the very bottom of the script, if nothing is false, it'll return true, so you're compliant for everything that's in that particular check. When you tell it to generate your remediation script, any moment now, it will change and change that script over to just set those values. There we go. So now the PowerShell changes, rather than looking, say, does it exist, cannot return true or false, it's just setting those values. I like this, not necessarily from a SCCM perspective. If someone comes to me and says, hey, I need to set a registry value, I'm not exactly sure where it goes or where it is, I'm like, hey, go export this, put it in here, it's going to write the code for you, even if you don't know any PowerShell at all. So it's a way to make your lives simpler, easier, not just for SCCM, but just PowerShell in general. If you're learning, it's a great way to kind of leverage those tools. The other thing here about the convert to GPO, the GPO conversion to the PowerShell. So this is the GitHub site that was linked on the slide. It's got great documentation here. There's a link to an older blog article as well when he first published this. Kind of explains how to use the tool, the different functionalities. The thing I like for both of these tools is the source for both of them is out on GitHub. So the website, the compiled executable for the Xander tool for doing that conversion, those tools, you can look into that source code, source code, and see what they're doing. So you're not just trusting that, hey, it's here, or if I need to modify that for something specific, maybe they're not handling something the right way. But it also means that you can go see and say, hey, we found a bug, we can submit an issue on GitHub, they'll respond to that, update the tools to accommodate it, or let you put a pull request in to do the fix for them, or to help with that. The other URL here, so we talked about the security framework. So this is the main page. It just kind of lays out the different levels or rings of that. The other thing to know about this, this as a security baseline is it's not just focused on what you can do with group policy. So we have a section in here that's for group policy. That's what we're going to focus on as far as checking for compliance here within SCCM. But there's other things that are associated with these baselines that you may be able to add in here as far as checks. You know, making sure you've got the right version of TPM, you've got the right settings there. You can put those into there. There's not necessarily something that's going to be in group policy to check for them, but you can certainly write compliance items for those as well. The other thing, while we're here and we're talking about the policies themselves as far as leveraging what's in group policy, one thing to know is that while 99% of what we do in group policy is changing registry values, not everything is done that way. There's some specific group policies that have or leverage the preference engine to make additional changes in there. So not everything you see in group policy is going to be converted into a registry item or things like that. So there may be specific things that you're going to have to do work to be able to track that compliance and also remediate it if you need to. There are some tools, not really part of what I'm going to present on, that will allow you to take policies that contain those items and apply them to the system as part of the security framework download, where we publish all of the group policy values for each OS version. Contained within that, there is a local GPO tool that will let you take those group policy items, put them into your local policy, just script that and automate it out. That's a great tool, but it's focused on doing local policy. So these are domains and systems. Some of these things will take a little tweaking to function and check that compliance.
What's the name of the local policy tool?
It's LGPO, ESC. And when you go, actually, so here on this doc site for the security configuration,
Sure.
right here for the Windows security baselines, this is the component of the doc site that talks about those baselines and the security compliance toolkit. The download for that contains the documentation for group policy, and it also has the download for the local GPO tool.
Sorry, I didn't know. Thanks.
All right, so it's enough of slides. So I'm gonna dig into the demo here. So just to make it a little more comfortable for myself, I'm gonna sit down. If you have a question, I don't happen to see you because my head's down in the screen, feel free to yell out and we'll stop and take on those questions. All right, so in here, let's go back here. So in here for our baseline, we have this huge list of policy items that you need to check. So there's a couple of different ways that we can take this on as far as doing it within SCCM. So we can sit down and say, here's a specific policy item. Let me go look at the documentation and see what reg key this associates with, and I can write a script to do that. But you know, there's hundreds of things that need to be set in the baseline. And it's easy to go into group policy and make those changes. You know, just double checking, checklisting that, hey, I set it all, I've got it in group policy. I can then apply it to the systems. And we're going to leverage these other tools so that you don't spend all day writing code just looking up paths and values that you need to set. So, make this here. So in here, this is a lab environment here. So I've created a group policy that contains that level 1 baseline settings in here. So through the magic of late nights and hotel rooms, we have all these items here set. So from here, I know I can just leverage these tools to help write these compliance items. I don't have to go set all of these in here. Before I show you the tools, and we talked a little about the things that you can't or aren't backed with registry items. That first item that just flashed by here on the screen, the account settings. So setting to make sure that the password age is set correctly and whatnot. That's a great example of something that is not backed by a registry item. And if I'm looking at this from a local system, I've got command line options. I can use the net tool to check these and set those, which works great for my local policy. If I'm a domain member, I'm going to get that from my domain, so I wouldn't necessarily in a domain situation check that against a local machine, but I would maybe write a compliance item that we're going to apply to my domain controllers to check for compliance against the domain to see that. Or I'm manually writing this and saying, I may put a remediation in, or maybe just a compliance check, because I can check every domain member and make sure they're picking up those changes. I wouldn't remediate it until I actually go to a domain controller and make those changes. I'll jump ahead here. So in the compliance item for that example specifically, I've taken one of those settings and created a compliance item for this. I'll get in and show you the code associated with that. All right. So here for a discovery script, it's very simply, we're just using the net command. We're just setting this and saying, hey, here is the item that we're looking for, and for here, this lock duration, I'm coming in and I'm looking for that particular line when I run this net accounts command to show me what that duration is. As a compliance check, I'm just going through parsing through that return to grab that out. And we'll pull this up so we can see that as well. So here, when we just run that command, as you can see, we're just getting string coming back. So this is just a technique of reading that string text that's coming back into the console, identifying that line, and grabbing that value. So that's simply here, we're just doing a split. We know where the divider is once we've identified that line, pulling that out. As a compliance item, all I'm going to do is pull that value and I'm going to send it back to SCCM. Here in my compliance item for SCCM, I'm setting it here. So I'm setting my value that I'm looking for at 15 days or 15, this particular one is 15 minutes. So we're looking at that and saying, hey, so if I needed to change that, so if that's my setting or my value for my compliance item or my regulatory baseline that I'm looking for, and we decide to make that more aggressive and say, nope, if you're locked out, we want you to be locked out for 30 minutes or for 2 hours, you just adjust your compliance item to match what your baseline is looking for, or whatever your corporate standard is that you're going to check for. So that's one simple example that I have in here. I have a couple kind of expanding that out. So we looked at the duration or the So here, and this is something that's this is specific to what we're doing. So here for these specific items, so when we look at account policy, different items have different rules. So if I'm looking at this threshold, I've got different things. So I can grab that value pretty easily, but sometimes the value is coming back. So I've got a note here in the script. If it comes back as never, when I'm trying to do a compliance check against that, I can't say, hey, it's greater than or equal to 0 because that, that's not the value that gets returned. So in this instance, if I put this in as a compliance check, I'm going to have my code account for that. So this is kind of getting creative with the things that aren't there. You're going to have to run those particular things. Check for the output for the commands that come back from that you're looking for, and then make adjustments here for your code. So here I chose to just give it a very big number to tell me that it's set to never, but you could certainly set that to however your code is looking for, your compliance item is checking for. Along the lines of kind of evaluating the different results that are coming back, when you're doing any sort of testing like this with compliance with security baselines, always make sure you're working in a test environment and you're not applying this here. I will admit to breaking my lab because I put the group policy in and I had everything in there and I didn't put a filter on it and it hit my domain controller and it turned the firewall on and nothing talked to anything. So, it's one of those things you're like, hey, I didn't change anything. Of course I did. It's just finding out what you've done. So it's one of those things. One, from a testing perspective, a lot of times we know things are going to break. I know I've got an application that it's okay except for this one thing. It needs to run, and the standard says turn on the UAC, but because of this application, we've got to change the setting on this group of machines. So always appropriately target both the group policy items that you're working with and the configuration items that you're working with in SCCM. All right, so back here into our lab environment here. So this is here, and the reason I have this out as an individual item here is depending on how the tools create this or you choose to create this, you have different options when you create your baseline. So here I've created a baseline or a compliance item, not sort of baseline, a compliance item that's looking at one specific setting. The tool that you use is going to take different approaches on how it creates these items. So it may create one compliance item for every single check within your group policy, and that may not be what you want. And those items you're going to have to go through and, you've got the code, you can simplify it and break it out if you need to make it specific. Other times you're like, I don't care. If you're not compliant, just tell me you're not compliant, and if I'm going to remediate, I'm going to force everything onto you. But it's important to consider that when you target these as well. So I may want to check for one specific thing, or may want to check for absolutely everything that exists within that baseline. So we'll move to easy mode now. So I've got my various tools loaded in here. So I've got the convert from the GPO to a CI PowerShell script here, and so we have the doc site, but here, this is great. It's going to prompt you if you don't put the items in. If you're just not sure, you decided not to read the doc site for this. It does have comment-based help enabled on here, so you can always just run that against there and say what are the parameters that are here. The script version, comment's not great, but at least tells you here the options that are in here that I want to provide. This particular script, if you're going to utilize it, one thing to note, the machine that you're running this on, it has to have both the PowerShell modules for AD and for Configuration Manager. So, if you have one or the other, you want to make sure you account for that, the machine you're running on this on, because we need the Configuration Manager commandlets, we need to have the console installed, and you also need the remote administration tools. Along with that, the account is going to need to have access to both environments in there. So we'll go ahead and run this script, and so we'll give it the group policy that we're going to target to create a compliance item for. And we have to give it our domain then we also have to give it our site code for SCCM. So we have a couple items in here as well. So by default, if we run this, it's just going to do discovery items. We have the ability to tell it to do remediation as well. For the example, we're not, but you can certainly have that. You can also choose to have it export, and the export option is just going to create a zip, a CAD file that you can use to create the compliance item and then put it into different environments. So this is one that I really like it as far as being easy. You just give it the group policy. It's going to go read all of those items out of the group policy. Anything that it can't do, it just will ignore and not create the compliance checks for them. And then it will automatically create the compliance items in SCCM for you. So as long as I did my work right in group policy, I'm just going to leverage and reuse that work rather than recreating it from hand to put it into SCCM.
So you could probably use this for drift. So as things change.
Right. So that's one of those
Instead,
things.
We're going to go back to our original.
So, and this is one, so it's a great point there about drift, and that's really the reason why we look at compliance items in SCCM, you know, and that was kind of the focus, at least from PowerShell's perspective, of desired configuration management. It's not necessarily that we would just want to set it, we want to track that drift from whatever we say it should be set to, and then give us the options to enforce. That could be not good. I got an email this morning, they're patching our lab environment, so if the host goes down, we may lose the lab. And that's one of those things as far as SCCM, you can see that. Same thing with DCM, just setting that up, having a reporting server, you can see that drift, and then know where you need to go track down why you're seeing that drift. Especially, it's easy to say remediate it, but if you consistently see things drifting, you need to go find out why. I'm looking at one group policy as part of what's being applied. Is there something else that's at a different layer? Changing those settings. Are we running an application that's trying to modify those settings? And it's finding why you're drifting, because that's where your the potential exists for compromise within your environment. Is something is not adhering to your standards.
DCM, the main
Desired configuration management. And that's really, so compliance items, that's what they came into SCCM as. So they came into SCCM really before PowerShell was released. So it was out there. When you go to create compliance items, you actually have the option to create compliance items using VBScript and JavaScript. So if you're really old school and you're more comfortable with those, you can still use them. But that's that was how we originally had to write the compliance items for it. Obviously, once PowerShell came out, it had its own engine. We began to leverage a lot of that for that. As a side note, as far as SCCM, compliance items are really some of the most powerful items that we have within SCCM. When we talk about what SCCM does, when we talk about leveraging the application model, deploying patches, the back end for all of that work is leveraging compliance items. So that's how SCCM leverages. So using it to do things to make your job easier, it's great. It's a great kind of selling point to, hey, we should do this more, and really demonstrate how powerful the tool can be. So here, our script is run, and now in our root folder, we have a compliance item that is looking at all of the items that we created from that group policy. So here, this compliance item has individual rules for all of the individual items within that group policy setting. So here it's looking at zone settings for IE, but as you see, it's coming in and saying, hey, I'm looking for this. This is a registry value that's being set. So here it's using the built-in provider for registry items to check for that compliance. And then actually for this, since this is focused around the registry components, all of these items are here. But this is an example of saying, hey, I've written individual checks for individual items. But here, if I decided I needed an individual compliance item, we could copy these checks or these compliance rules out and put them into an individual compliance item itself, so that it could be a little more granular when we could create our baselines. So the other tool to show you guys, this is the registry compliance tool. So I showed you the website that will do it for you, and this is the compiled executable. Let me clean that up before we run it again. All right. So here for the reg tool, we have to point it at a registry profile that's been exported. So what I simply what I did is create a backup of the group policy item, and then we just pulled that profile out of there. So here, when we run this tool, we just run it. It tells us, hey, here's the command line that we're looking for. I need to give it either a reg file or this profile from the group policy. The cab file, the name and the path of where you want to create that cab file, so you can create the import into SCCM, and then the name of the compliance item. You have the option to specify if it's a 32-bit or if it's a user-focused item as well, but at a basic level, we just need to give it the required one. So here, our reg file. Apparently I can't type this way. And then the name of our CI. So it's going to go through, it's going to parse all of those settings within the here, and then it's going to create our cat file for us. In here, we can come and we can then import this in.
It's possible to find something with malware on it, change the config.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's saying, hey, there's I'm setting a config to say let this process run, or we're being blocked by group policy. If it's saying, hey, I've already compromised the system, I've already got admin access, I can flip it so I can do more things, and then it just monitors for that key value to change, and if something sets it back, it'll, and that's where, as we're talking about baselining it, when we look at it from a compliance setting, we're going to give, when we deploy this baseline, we're going to say, here's a schedule. I want you to check once a week, once a month, every 15 minutes, whatever the criticality is, we're going to set that schedule. Obviously, if you've got something going on and you're seeing that constant, hey, every time this runs, there's a remediation. That's where we have to look at it and say, is there something switching it at a different level within our application stack that's going on, or is there something going on with these machines that we need to go drive in and determine what's impacting it? All right, so now with this compliance item, it takes a little bit different approach. So like with the website, as you saw, when you give it a registry file, it just gives you one big splat of PowerShell for all of the different items. So we get one compliance item or compliance check here that we're going to do. And then here when we go into the script, just like for the website, it's just one script that accounts for all of those settings within that item. Okay. And then once you've got this deployed, or created within here, you can associate this with the baseline, and then you can deploy that baseline out. And this is where we really kind of illustrate kind of the value of what you can do with Configuration Manager. So we've been talking about, hey, I'm in a domain and I'm doing this. With Configuration Manager, the machines that you're managing don't have to exist within the same domain. They don't have to exist within the same trusted forest. They don't even have to exist within your network. These could be work group joined machines. These could be bring your own devices that you put the client on that you're managing. So from here, from SCCM, you have the ability to track your compliance across your entire state for your enterprise. It's one of those great things, especially nowadays where machines move around. They're not necessarily on your network. If you've put in and you're leveraging either the internet management points to be able to give them policy, you can get the results back there. Also the Cloud Management Gateway, the ability to get these results back. We haven't really talked about it here, but you can take these same scripts, put them into the Run PowerShell script feature for SCCM, and then if you've got laptops that are sitting at home that you're detecting something's wrong with them, you can push a script to do remediation to them right then, right there. As long as they're online, they're going to get it within a few minutes and become compliant or execute that script for you. Yeah. So we finished a little ahead of where I thought we would be, so we'll just open up for questions here related to this, to anything else. Feel free to ask away. If not,
I have a question.
Sure.
So to push the compliance script to the home user,
yeah.
Which way does the traffic go? Which need to open up the line?
So that's it's leveraging those cloud things. So the greatest example there is with the Cloud Management Gateway. You don't have to open up any communication into your home users there. We're using that Cloud Management Gateway as a proxy. So there's a core set of ports that are open between your SCCM servers and that Cloud Management Gateway. Primarily, it's the 443 and a couple of ports that it communicates with for those specific instances of VMs that exist up in the cloud. The traffic coming in and out, it's simply HTTP traffic. We're using certificates that have to be deployed to your both to the Cloud Management Gateway and to your machines that you're going to manage. Those certificates are what tell the client they can talk to the Cloud Management Gateway. Cloud Management Gateway can talk to your server, and then that's it. I mean, it's policy traffic, so if we're sending it out, it's just a couple KBs of policy that says, hey, here's new instructions for you. If you need to go download something, that Cloud Management Gateway acts as a distribution point. So if it needs to grab content associated with a package or an application that you need to trigger, it's going to do that. With the Run Scripts feature, that script is actually sent to the machine as part of that policy information. So it just gets serialized into a text file and sent down, and then it creates a PowerShell script locally on the client. It's going to execute that script and then send the results back as a status message into your SCCM infrastructure.
So my boss always wants metrics. Does SCCM do metrics charts?
Right. No, so SCCM will give you metrics. So you get some very basic metrics around the console itself. So I can come in and say, hey, I've got a compliance item. It's deployed out. I can see I've got this one. It's sent to a total of one machine. It's compliant. I'm 100% compliant. But we also have SQL reporting services that you can leverage to have. There's some built-in reports that you can display that. You can write custom reports there. My favorite for managers is we'll write you a report and we'll set you up a subscription, And if you want a report every Monday morning at 8 a.m. on whatever, just email it to you or drop it on a file share so that they can go get that report and you don't get the email or the call that says, hey, can you run this report for me?
Well, SCCM will be reporting in SCCM will let you do that. Just make a subscription for it.
Say it again.
Reporting under SCCM will let you. Will get
Right. Yes, it will. Yeah.
That goes back to the SQL reporting.
Yeah, it's SQL reporting in the back end, and that's where, by default, the only feature you're going to get when you stand up your SQL reporting is the ability to put it on a file share. You have to enable the email connection within the SQL reporting setup when you set that up so your subscriptions can be email-based as well. But that's simply defining the information about your mail servers and your authentication, all that basic stuff associated with that.
But yeah, you can get good reports on your information baselines,
Yeah.
and it'll tell you how much off you are.
Right. And then, kind of for me, it's a great example. So I work with companies a lot where they said, hey, we just implemented vulnerability scanning. And the vulnerability scanner says, hey, you have, 1,000 machines and there are 20,000 items that you're not compliant across all of them. And we come in with SCCM and we kind of look at it and say, okay, tell us the biggest item. What are you not compliant for? Is it, hey, I've got a patch applied, or I don't have it and we just need to apply the patch? We'll apply the patch. If we need to apply the patch and then set a registry item to enforce something as well, then we'll do it. And then we leave that configuration item that remediates it in effect. So if we build a new machine, a machine drifts for whatever reason, we apply a patch, something gets reverted, a group policy hasn't picked it up yet, then we'll do it. And then a lot of admins will know, hey, we run vulnerability scans Friday night. So our compliance baselines get executed Thursday night at 11 p.m. So, they're making sure that they're going to report as compliant as possible, which, from a metrics perspective, that's everybody just making themselves look good. But from a compliance piece, we want you not only consider, oh, let's run it at Thursday, let's run it again on Sunday night and Monday night, and, finding what that schedule is and what you need to do and keep yourselves in a good position. Sure.
You mentioned some non-registry types. That's one of the most common ones.
So it really depends on what you're trying to do. And so the example I gave was, looking at the account settings and what you need to do. When you look at the documentation, like the Excel spreadsheet that says here's all of the items that came out for this release, and, if there's not a registry key associated with it in the documentation for that, it will tell you this is not done here, and that means you've just got to dig to see. At a most common level, it's almost anything. I mean, sometimes we have to go in and say, hey, I'm doing something and I don't have a command line to do it, but I can write a local policy baseline file. I can export that out and then I'll just run the tool to import that in because, I don't have a great way to put here and say, let's run this and granularly set permissions for a specific item. So it really depends on what. I wouldn't say there's a common, we see this as a top 10. It's more, this is what we're doing, where we're deficient, and digging in from there.